My husband bet away our entire life, opening with a slightly shaky, determined voice, perhaps a beat of dramatic music fading in and out. Can you even imagine the gut-wrenching shock of checking your daughter's college savings, an account meticulously built over 15 years, only to find a measly $12.40 staring back at you? My husband, Paul, had systematically drained every penny gambling. But what he didn't know was that in that moment, I decided I was about to gamble with his entire life. It started with a phone call from the college, a simple notification that Kira's tuition payment had bounced. My blood ran cold. That account should have held a solid $80,000, the foundation of her future. Instead, there was pocket change. For 15 years, I had faithfully poured half my paycheck into it, trusting Paul to manage the rest of our finances. We were both working full-time, him a sales manager, me a nurse, and we had a plan: live off his salary, save every cent of mine for our kids' college and our retirement. Paul always had an answer, always a stack of meticulously printed, fake bank statements showing our money growing, showing interest accumulating. He'd been taking cash advances on credit cards I didn't even know existed, briefly parking the money in the account when he knew I might check, then snatching it right back out for his next bet. That bounced payment was the tripwire. It forced me to dig, and what I unearthed was a nightmare. Paul wasn't working late or having client dinners. He was at a casino 40 minutes from his office, every lunch break, every evening. They knew him by name, comped his drinks. He'd blown over $300,000 in 5 years, including taking out a second mortgage on our house, a mortgage he'd forged my signature for. My hands literally trembled as I stared at the evidence. When I confronted him, his response was so utterly infuriating, so unbelievable, it almost made me laugh. He looked me in the eye and said it wasn't that bad, that he'd been close to winning so many times. He tried to explain gambling strategy, told me I was overreacting, and actually had the audacity to declare that winners don't quit when they're down. He even blamed me for not making more money, implying his desperate need to multiply our savings through gambling was somehow my fault. I knew then, and there I couldn't divorce him immediately. He'd destroyed our credit and accumulated massive debts in both our names. If I left, I'd be left with nothing but his mess. So I decided to get creative. My first move was quiet, subtle. I opened new bank accounts, exclusively in my name, and redirected my paychecks. Paul was too consumed by his obsession to notice any real financial shifts. Then my performance began. I started buying lottery tickets and scratch-offs. Just a few at first, leaving them casually around the house. I'd mentioned feeling lucky. Paul scoffed. "Lotteries for suckers," he'd sneer. "Real gamblers play cards and slots." Oh, Paul, you had no idea. After about a month, I told him I'd won $5,000 on a scratch-off. I showed him a losing ticket I'd cleverly altered with Photoshop and printed on cardstock. His eyes, usually dead and glazed over, lit up like a Christmas tree. He instantly demanded the money to invest in his casino system. I smiled sweetly and told him I'd already deposited it into a new, locked investment account that wouldn't be accessible for 6 months. He was furious but powerless. Over the next few weeks, I kept winning smaller amounts, $200 here, $500 there. Each time, I'd show him another fake ticket, another photoshopped win, and declare it was going straight into my impenetrable locked investment account. Paul started buying lottery tickets himself, spending hundreds trying to crack my supposed system. He was convinced I had some secret, some strategy, and demanded I share it. I had just picked numbers that felt right, I'd say, a sly smirk hidden behind my innocent expression. Meanwhile, my real strategy involved working overtime shifts and diligently stashing every penny into my actual secret accounts. Paul, bless his heart, became so fixated on the lottery, so sure he could replicate my imaginary luck, he started going to the casino less. Then came the grand finale. I told Paul I'd won $50,000 in the state lottery. I orchestrated an elaborate, congratulatory letter, and even had a friend call, pretending to be from the lottery office. Paul completely lost it. The excitement, the greed, the delusion. It was intoxicating to watch. He was already planning how to triple it at the casino with his sure bet. I told him the payout would take 3 weeks to process. Those 3 weeks were pure madness. Paul spiraled into a gambling fever dream. He maxed out our last credit card buying lottery tickets, convinced lightning would strike twice. He borrowed money from his brother, Wayne, promising double back when my winnings arrived. He even hit up one of those predatory cash advance places. He was so utterly convinced that $50,000 was coming. He bet everything he could beg, borrow, or steal. He was digging his own grave, and I was holding the shovel. The day the money was supposedly arriving, I filed for divorce and moved out. I left Paul a simple note. I never actually won anything. All the tickets were fake. While you destroyed yourself chasing imaginary winnings, I was saving my real money. My divorce lawyer, Liam, had already compiled a mountain of documentation. Paul's gambling debts, the forged mortgage papers. The judge was appalled, her expression darkening as she realized Paul had stolen our children's future to feed his addiction. The ruling was swift and decisive. Paul got all the debt he created through his criminal forgery, while I got my separate savings and my car. He ended up moving back in with his mother, Shirley, who, to her credit, was utterly disgusted when she learned he'd gambled away her grandchildren's college funds. But here's the truly unbelievable part, the universe's ultimate twist of poetic justice. A week after Paul moved out, I was sitting in my car, staring at a lottery ticket I'd bought 6 months earlier on a random impulse. I'd shoved it in my wallet and forgotten about it completely while I was orchestrating Paul's downfall. The numbers on that ticket matched perfectly. All 6 of them. The jackpot amount, $3.2 million. I started laughing and crying at the same time. The timing was so absurd, it felt unreal. My hand shook so badly I could barely hold it. I kept checking the numbers, even though I'd already verified them 5 times. The date on the ticket? The same week I'd opened my secret bank accounts, back when I was still pretending to believe Paul's lies. I remembered buying it exhausted after a double shift, just because the jackpot was enormous. Now here I was, with an actual winning ticket worth more money than I'd ever imagined. And Paul, he was at his mother's house, probably still convinced he was one bet away from winning big. I wiped my eyes and drove straight to Liam's office. He took one look at my face and the ticket, pulled me into his office, and calmly called the state lottery office. After a long, tense silence on the phone, he looked at me, his expression unreadable, and confirmed it. It was real. He told me we needed to claim it immediately before Paul somehow found out and tried to claim half. The fear that he would try, even after everything, was a sickening feeling. But Liam quickly reassured me. Because I'd bought the ticket after filing for divorce and after separating our finances, Paul had no legal claim. The relief that washed over me was so intense, I actually felt dizzy. He explained that the purchase date and my separate bank records proved it was my separate property. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind raced, not just with excitement, but with purpose. Kira's tuition, which had bounced, Amelia's canceled summer camp. These were the ghosts of Paul's betrayal. I pulled out my laptop and started researching. How do lottery winners protect their money? I read horror stories of people losing it all, of family members crawling out of the woodwork, of ex-spouses making claims. The irony wasn't lost on me. Paul gambled away our actual savings, and now I was terrified of losing money I won by sheer chance. I took notes on financial advisors, investment strategies, anonymous trusts. The next morning, at the lottery office, everything felt surreal. Liam advised taking the lump sum, about $1.9 million after taxes, to avoid any future legal loopholes. I signed the papers, my hand steady despite the disbelief. They warned me not to tell anyone until I had proper legal and financial protection in place. I walked out feeling like I was in a movie, watching someone else's life unfold. I immediately called Kira, asking her to come home that weekend. She sounded worried, asking if it was about Dad. "No," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "It's actually good news for once." When Kira arrived, I showed her the ticket. Then, the real magic. I pulled up her college account balance, already rebuilding with my saved money. She stared for a long time, then burst into tears of relief. She confessed she'd been looking at student loans, part-time jobs, thinking her education was over. She admitted her anger at Paul, her guilt for hating her own father. I told her she was allowed to be angry. Paul's actions had real consequences, including losing his children's respect and trust. I assured her all 4 years of college were covered. Telling Amelia was harder. She was younger, still grappling with why Dad was at Grandma's, why we were getting divorced. I explained simply, Dad made very bad choices with money and hurt our family. But now we had a chance to fix things. She asked if Dad could come back if he said sorry. My heart broke as I told her no. Some things couldn't be fixed with just apologies. She cried, missing him, and I held her, realizing Paul had destroyed so much more than just money. He'd stolen their sense of security, their trust. A few days later, Shirley called, asking to meet for coffee. I was nervous, unsure whose side she was on, but her voice was sincere, heartbroken. We met, and she told me Paul was staying in her guest room, and she was horrified by what he'd done, especially stealing from his own children's future. She said Paul was still insisting he was close to winning big, that I had sabotaged him. She'd told him he destroyed his own life, that he needed to take responsibility, but he just made excuses, talking about gambling strategies. She apologized for raising a son who could do this. I told her it wasn't her fault. Paul made his own adult choices. 3 weeks later, Liam called. The divorce hearing was next Thursday. Paul's lawyer had tried every delaying tactic, but the judge was fed up. At the courthouse, Liam reviewed his thick folder of evidence. Paul walked past US, refusing to make eye contact. Inside, the judge, a formidable woman, listened patiently as Paul's lawyer argued for more time, for a different division of assets. Then Liam presented his case, the forged mortgage, the hidden credit card statements showing $300,000 in gambling losses, the empty savings account. The judge's expression hardened. She looked directly at Paul and demanded he explain how he justified stealing his daughter's college funds. Paul actually started babbling about his betting system, how he was developing a strategy. His lawyer frantically tried to silence him, but the damage was done. The judge slammed her hand down. "I've seen enough," she declared. She ruled that Paul received none of the marital assets because he had destroyed them through fraud and criminal forgery. The house went entirely to me. She ordered him to pay child support based on his sales manager's salary, warning him of contempt if he fell behind. Paul's lawyer protested, claiming this left his client with nothing. The judge cut him off. Paul forfeited fairness when he forged her signature and stole from his own children. I walked out feeling lighter than I had in months. The crushing weight had finally lifted. 2 weeks passed, and then a bank notification buzzed on my phone during a night shift. I stared at the screen. $1,900,000. It didn't look real. I kept refreshing the banking app, just to be sure. The next morning, I called the financial advisor Liam had recommended, Viola Reed. She specialized in lottery winners, and her calm, professional voice immediately put me at ease. We met that afternoon. Her first rule: tell absolutely nobody about the money until we had proper protection. We spent 3 hours outlining a plan. First, fully fund the girls' education. Second, pay off the house completely and clear Paul's remaining debts that were assigned to me. Third, conservative investments for steady income. She even said if I was careful, I could live comfortably off the returns, maybe even quit nursing. The idea of not working scared me, though. After 15 years of Paul's lies, anything that felt too good, too easy, made me uneasy. I told her I wanted to keep my job, She smiled. That's actually smart, she said. It maintains routine and purpose. I called Kira's college bursar's office and told them I wanted to pay off all 4 years of her tuition in advance. The woman on the phone was confused, then amazed. The same woman who'd called me months ago about a bounced payment. 2 days later, a wire transfer for $68,000 cleared. I set up the same arrangement for Amelia, even though she was years away from college, putting money into a dedicated education account. Telling Kira about the paid tuition over video chat was incredible. She cried again, asking if it was really real, if she really didn't have to worry anymore. I promised her it was. Paul, somehow, found out about the lottery. I imagine his brother, Wayne, heard rumors. One Thursday evening, I was making dinner when pounding started on my front door, hard enough to rattle the frame. Paul, wild, angry. He was yelling that I owed him half, that we were still married when I bought the ticket. I grabbed my phone and called 911. He kept screaming through the door about community property and how I can't steal what's rightfully his. The police arrived quickly. I showed them the restraining order Liam had filed. They talked to Paul, then he finally got in his car. They warned him that if he returned, he'd be arrested. I sat on my couch, shaking for 20 minutes after they left. Paul's lawyer filed an emergency motion 3 days later, again claiming he was entitled to half. Liam, calm as ever, told me not to worry. At the emergency hearing, Liam walked the judge through the timeline. My separate bank statements, the ticket purchase date, the divorce filing, Paul's criminal forgery, his $300,000 gambling losses. He argued that Paul had eliminated any claim to community property when he fraudulently destroyed everything we had, and that I purchased the ticket with my own separate earnings after the marriage was effectively over. The judge reviewed the evidence for 5 minutes, then denied Paul's motion completely. She told his lawyer he was wasting the court's time and any future frivolous motions would result in sanctions. Paul looked furious, but there was nothing either of them could do. Wayne called me that weekend, angry, saying I was selfish and that family should help family. I told him Paul's debts were Paul's responsibility, not mine. He called me names, and I blocked his number. Kira came home for winter break looking healthier. She told me her grades had improved now, that she wasn't constantly worried about money. She'd even joined a campus group for students affected by parental addiction, finding support and understanding. She asked if I'd go to a family session with her counselor, and I immediately agreed. The video session with Kira's counselor was insightful. Kira spoke about the confusing emotions of loving someone who hurt her so badly. The counselor gently explained that Paul's addiction didn't erase the good father he sometimes was, but it also didn't excuse his actions. She helped us understand how addiction coexists with love, and how Kira could hold both truths without guilt. I told Kira she got to decide what kind of relationship she wanted with her father, and I would support her completely. A few weeks later, Shirley called again. Her voice was tired but relieved. Paul had checked himself into a 30-day gambling addiction program. He'd finally hit rock bottom after the judge denied his claim to my lottery money. He'd borrowed her car, lost $800 she'd given him, and came home sobbing at 3 a.m. She drove him to treatment the next day. I asked how he was doing. Shirley said he was starting to understand what he destroyed, but he still made excuses about bad luck and timing. I told her I hoped the treatment helped him, not because I wanted him back, but because I truly didn't want him to suffer. I just needed him out of our lives, so he couldn't hurt us anymore. 6 months later, I sat in a folding chair at Kira's outdoor graduation, watching her walk across the stage in her cap and gown. Amelia cheered beside me. Shirley was behind us, dabbing her eyes. Paul wasn't there. Kira had told me 2 months prior she didn't want him there, and while a part of me felt sad for him, I knew it was the natural consequence of his choices. The lottery money paid for all 4 years of Kira's college, stress-free. Amelia's funds were sitting ready. Our house was fully paid off. We had investments that would keep us stable for life. But the real win wasn't the money, even though it changed everything practically. The real win was finding the strength to protect my daughters when Paul wouldn't, to see through his lies, to fight back instead of just accepting what he'd done. I'm not the same person who trusted blindly for 15 years. I'm harder now, more careful about who I trust, what I believe. I check bank statements obsessively, and I probably always will. But I'm also more certain of what matters and what I'll accept from people in my life. Kira's name was called. I cheered, Amelia cheered, Shirley clapped. Life isn't perfect, and the betrayal still stings when I think about those 15 years of lies. But we're genuinely okay now, my daughters and me. We're stable, safe, and moving forward. What about you? Have you ever had to fight to protect your family from someone who was supposed to love them? Tell me your story in the comments below.